there was something genuine going on, I kind of shifted gears and devoted my life to that.
How did you come to realize that something genuine was going on, in your own words?
Well, I had been trained in diagnosing mental illness, and I had treated a good bit of reasonable range of mental illness in terms of in the community. And then I was also working in the Pennsylvania state prison system, where a lot of the severe mental illness ends up getting housed because the state hospital system collapsed in the 80s and 90s. So sadly, we put a lot of our mentally ill in prisons in the United States. So anyway, I had seen quite a bit, and possession doesn't look like any of that. And the thing that everybody, the armchair critic, would immediately say, "Oh, that's just epilepsy. You're dumb. You're misunderstanding it," or it's
Or
schizophrenia or something.
schizophrenia?
Yeah, schizophrenia doesn't mean multiple personalities. People just have that misapprehension about the word. So technically, it would be dissociative identity disorder. Um, but here's what I found is that schizophrenia doesn't make you suddenly fluent in ancient languages, right? Multiple personalities doesn't make you able to speak Greek. We had one case with Icelandic, but the grammar was from 600 years ago. Very obscure stuff. We had a woman here in Pennsylvania raised basically on a farm with a high school education, spoke only English, and she was interrogated in English, French, Latin, Lithuanian, and German during the exorcisms and responded to all the languages properly. So like that's the first of the signs of possession, is facility in all languages.
Were you there for that one where she spoke all these different languages?
I wasn't there when all of them were interrogated, but I saw her interrogated in different languages at different times. And then I had friends that were there. Yeah, they were kind of spread out. There was
And she, I assume that she was never familiar with any of those languages, because there are some cases where someone may have studied Mandarin when they were younger, and then they went into a coma, and then they came out of the coma speaking fluent Mandarin. But that wasn't the case here, right? It's not as if she had like studied any of these languages and done any sort of.
And even if you had studied one or two, it'd be very rare. You'd be quite a polyglot to be able to speak 5 or 6 languages. And then the more obscure ones, like the ancient languages, like it's pretty rare these days to speak Latin properly. You can get a basic functionality in Latin. It's very painful for me, but you can get a very basic knowledge of Latin, but it's hard to get really good at Latin. Greek is probably more difficult. So, like for instance, I know this will sound strange to you, but I got a text in Greek from a possessed person. So the demon took over. I know it sounds goofy, but demons aren't stupid. They know how to use phones. They know how to text people. And I had to find a priest friend who had a professor friend who knew Greek well enough to translate. And then, of course, you would say like, oh, well, that's just you did a Google Translate or something. But actually, the grammar was proper. And if you've ever studied ancient languages like Greek or Latin, Google Translate is awful, just awful at translating those. And it included foul language that isn't in the normal Greek dictionary that you would find, like colloquial dirty words, negative stuff. So anyway, the first thing is languages, and there's been myriad cases where they've been either asked questions in other languages or they've spoken them. And then knowledge of secret things. And once you see enough of this and you get past the point of saying like, well, maybe it's the hyper rare thing with the coma, and maybe they heard it on TV and they got one sentence when they were 6 years old. Once you get past and realize like, no, they actually know the full language. And then the really obscure stuff like the Icelandic, but Icelandic from the grammar structure from 600 years ago. I had a friend on the internet in Iceland, because Icelandic is, if you know anything about it, it's fairly obscure, really complicated. Like the words are like 40 characters long, crazy language to try to learn. So I had a friend who was able to translate it for me. So anyway, you see that stuff enough and you come to the point where and realize that you can't think your way out of it anymore.
Since Blai had been trained in treating mental illness and had done a lot of field work around mental illness, it seems safe to say that Blai would be able to recognize mental illness when he saw it. Therefore, it seems like he would be able to tell the difference between mental illness and something else, period. He made a good point when he said that mental illness is not known to make someone fluent in a foreign language, in an ancient foreign language, period. And people who are involved in the study of demons know that one of the telltale signs of demon possession is fluency in language with no prior study of that language. Such fluency is something that defies natural explanation and therefore gives credence to the hypothesis of demon possession and therefore supernaturalism.
If you've seen people wither and die from meth, you would take it very seriously in terms of trying to warn other people. And then some people will say, like, well, it can't be that powerful of an addiction. You know, I've never felt that. And so, you know, I just don't believe you. And it's like, okay, fair enough. You don't have to. We could all figure it out for ourselves. But boy, hopefully this is not an area that you have to go stick your foot in the pool and find out for yourself. Please avoid it. Like, maybe just don't, because man, it's awful. Like the suffering people go through. It's not so much about the scary stories. The point is the human suffering, and it's avoidable.
Yeah, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
One of the questions I've got is like, why doesn't Jesus just prevent this from happening in the first place? Or like, you know, why does he allow it to go on until, say, Wednesday at 3 p.m.? Like, why doesn't he just get rid of it altogether, like earlier? Why does he allow these things to go on so long? That just seems pretty perplexing to me. Is it because he? I mean, the explanation that I come up with is that because, like, in these cases when we're dealing with possession, from what I've learned from Father Vince, is that you've got to invite this spirit, or this, you've got to invite it in somehow. It's not as if you're just like walking down the street one day and then you just, oh, now I've got a demon. Like, that's not how it works from learning from him. So maybe it's a case of like Jesus is respecting the free will of the person to like actively go and do that on their own, you know, for free will, their volition.
Yep.
Is that how you would view these things?
Yes, that's how they get in. The question, you know, the mystery of evil, of why it's allowed by God. Number one, it's what you identified as free will. So he loves us and he wants to give us a chance to be kind to our neighbor, love God, and make our way back to God, right? He wants us to have that opportunity. In order to have that opportunity, he doesn't want blind robots that can't do anything else, like the plant that can only grow towards the sun, and that's all it knows, and that's all it can do. It can't choose anything else. He wants us to exercise our rational mind and choose him, and also reject the evil. And the evil is cruelty to neighbor, exploitation of others, harming others, getting ahead at other people's expense, that type of thing. And then, of course, worse evil, just destructive evil. So he wants us to grow and learn. Like, if you think of bad things you did when you were younger, like, we've all done bad things when we were younger. We've probably done bad things yesterday or last week, but worse when we were younger, okay? The reason, most likely, that we're doing better now is because we've learned from our mistakes. We fell, we messed up, we felt bad, we reflected on it, and then we changed. And that's what evil does, is it provides an opportunity for temptation so that we can get a corrective experience and realize, oh, being a selfish jerk isn't the way to go. It doesn't feel very good. It doesn't lead to good things in my life. It doesn't lead to good things with family and friends. So I'm going to change and try to be a better person. That's what evil does, is it gives us that clarity. By having the shadow there, we can see the value of the light, essentially. I'm not saying it's a good, but God brings good out of it. So even in this extreme end, with this demonic stuff that we're talking about, God is allowing it as a corrective, negative experience for the person that spiritually has walked up to the edge of the cliff and is teetering and is about to fall off. And at the last moment, he allows them to fully see the reality of what they've chosen before they fall off that cliff. And so hopefully they will then reject the evil and run back to God and say, oh, I didn't understand. Please forgive me. I want to be with you. I want to love others. I want to feel safe, all of that. And so the demon, in spite of itself, serves, because in the end, there's great spiritual conversion in people that are freed of this stuff. They have very fruitful spiritual lives from there on out as a rule, and they're running after God for the rest of their lives in a good way, not in a fearful way, but in a joyful way, and they're grateful for being freed.
Recap, Blai said Jesus doesn't prevent demon possession from happening because God loves us and wants to give us a chance to freely make our way back to him. To prevent demon possession from happening would be to take away that freedom. God gives us free will. To prevent demon possession from happening would be another exercise in taking away our free will. Well, I said God doesn't want blind robots. If God took away evil influence, we would become blind robots. Well, I said God wants us to choose him and reject evil. If God took evil away, he would be taking the choice away, and we would become blind robots. Well, I said evil is cruelty to others, exploitation of others, harming others, getting ahead at the expense of others, and destructive evil. If God took those things away, we would be robbed of our choice to choose good. We would be robbed of our ability to grow and learn. And Jesus, well, I said, wants us to grow and learn. He wants us to be free to make mistakes so that we can learn from mistakes and grow from the mistakes that we make. If God removed evil, then that ability to learn and grow would be taken from us. Evil provides an opportunity for temptation, Blai said, so we can get a corrective experience. Well, to remove evil would be to remove the good that can come from such corrective experiences. Blai said by having the shadow there, we can see the value of the light. So when you have the evil there juxtaposed against the good, then you can see the value of the good better than you would if the evil was not there. I mentioned that there's a great spiritual conversion in people who were freed from demonic influence.
So, how did you know that you were dealing with Satan in the first place?
Well, like I said, the first clue, and it was just a clue, I'm not saying it's evidence, was the pronoun change. So there was a lot of references to, our kingdom being affected by what was going on with these exorcisms and some stuff that was going on in the world that they would sometimes talk about, and that they really wanted to keep this person, and this person strategically was really valuable to them. Probably because of some spiritual gifts that God had given that person, and that hell was trying to suppress and keep those gifts from operating in their life and spiritually affecting things. And then, like I said, though I'm sure he was affected, he showed no reaction to holy water, crosses, sacramentals, basically ignored the exorcism going on in the background, didn't react to things, didn't answer questions, just didn't seem to care, just would make a beeline, apparently for me. As soon as he would manifest the body, he would launch out of the chair and take me to the floor by the throat, and we'd roll around on the carpet the whole time, basically. And the strength was, unlike any strength I had felt before. I've rolled around on the carpet with a lot of possessed people over the years, and there is a lot of strength in them. But this was on a whole different ballpark. And though a lot of demons will say they're Satan in the beginning because they think it'll rattle people or scare them, you can tell, one, they're not serious. They're like random demon number 35, like bottom rank, and they're just saying they're Satan to be goofy and try to be scary because they're liars. But yeah, none of them have ever genuinely taken that position. So anyway, didn't react to things. Strength was off the charts, and the pronoun changed. So that may not be enough for you, but after 15 years of doing this, and I've been at somewhere north of 1,000 exorcisms, this was qualitatively different. There was a lot of details about this particular exorcism that were different. And it's fine. People's first reaction is to armchair quarterback it and say like, "Oh, I don't agree. I don't think so." And it's like,
Yeah.
It's easy to say that not ever having done this once, let alone for a long time. But I understand. It's fine.
In one particular exorcism, Blai recognized that he was dealing with Satan himself rather than just a random demon. One of the ways that Blai knew there was a difference between this particular being and just a regular demon, that this was Satan and not just a regular demon, Blai said, was that the being, Satan in this case, used a different pronoun to identify himself rather than the same one that every other random common demon does. And Satan showed no reaction to holy water, to other symbols like crosses, sacramentals, and paid no attention to the exorcism as it went on. Satan physically attacked Blai, and evidently in other exorcisms, the other demons who were not Satan would not attack Blai like Satan did in this one. And the physical strength in this particular exorcism in which Satan participated was unlike any other situation Blai had been in. There were other possessions where Blai witnessed strength, supernatural strength, but this was an entirely different category. It was superior strength to anything Blai had ever experienced before. So this being must have been superior to the other beings that Blai had been involved with before, lending credence to the fact that this was Satan in this particular occurrence. And lastly, Blai said that this time the being genuinely took Satan's position and didn't just try to say they were Satan like others would have done in other situations.
So this could serve as really good evidence for the truth of Christianity, seems to me. Like you could at least grant that it could be very good evidence for that. So the question that I wanted to pose to you, and this is kind of, the word escapes me, but it's going to be right up your wheelhouse because you've basically written a book on miracles as well. So what would you say, is there any kind of like relationship between miracles and demon possession in the sense of both of these provide evidence for the truth of Christianity? Would you see that as there being a relationship between the two? Obviously, the contexts are way different and things are way different, but what do you see as the relationship between the two?
Yeah, so I guess the first thing, Cameron, it's important to step back and realize that demonic possession and all this stuff that we're talking about, this is not something that only happens to Christians. There are Islamic exorcists that use two different methods to do exorcisms. There's Jewish exorcists in certain branches of Judaism. There are Buddhist exorcists. There's Native American exorcists. There are exorcists in India. This is a universal human problem. And if you take away the names of the spirits and you just say, what does it do? They all will tell you it's a deceptive spirit that lies and tricks its way into people's lives and then destroys them. Now, just because it's a universal human problem doesn't mean that like it's every religion is completely valid and it doesn't matter what you do, go to any exorcist of any type. God does.
Bertuzzi asks Blai if Blai thinks demon possession could be really good evidence for Christianity's truth. Bertuzzi thinks that demon possession could serve as really good evidence for the truth of Christianity. Sure, it at least gives evidence that there's a supernatural realm out there. Bertuzzi asks Blai if there's any relationship between miracles and demon possession, in that taken together, miracles and demon possession taken together both provide evidence for the truth of Christianity. But Blai seems to tamp that down a little bit when he says that demon possession is not unique to the Christian religion. It does not only happen to Christian people. Blai says that there are exorcists in other religions too, such as Islam, Judaism, Buddhism, Native American, and Indian. because demon possession is a universal human problem. It doesn't just happen to Christian people or people in one of the religions in the family of Christian religion. Each exorcist from each background will tell you that the demon is a deceptive spirit that lies and tricks its way into people's lives and then destroys people's lives. The fact that demon possession is a universal human problem does not mean that demon possession makes all other religions true, like Christianity is true. Of course, when Jesus came, he showed that he had power over demons and cast them out by the power of his name. It seems to me that the reality of demon possession is one of the pieces of evidence that one can use to make a strong cumulative case to the truth of Christianity. You can use demon possession with things like fine-tuning, things like the beginning of the universe, things like the moral law written on the human heart, things like the design found in the universe, moral argument, the teleological argument, the cosmological argument, all of those classical arguments that apologists make for the truth of theism that don't even necessarily get you all the way to Christianity. That when you add the reality of the demonic realm to these other pieces of evidence, it shows that theism is increasingly rational and evidential.
That was really good. So what would you say to someone who's watching this? And I know that we're going to get responses from atheist YouTubers who are going to say these guys are crazy. What would you say to someone like that? What would you have to offer to someone who just thinks that you're just talking crazy stuff tonight?
That's fine. So it's not about like arguing to try to convince people that this topic's real. If you want to look at some reasons why you might want to consider that it could be real, first off, I would look at the span of human history, that this has been a universal human complaint and problem in all the world religions down through history. If you then want to say, okay, well, it's just been misunderstood psychiatric problems or medical problems, then you have to look a little more closely. I guess first off, you have to wonder why it's still around. So why do people in the exorcism community get phone calls from doctors and psychiatrists with cases that they say, like, and I've had these conversations, doctors like, I've been doing this 25 years, 30 years, whatever, a lot of experience. I've got this case. This isn't normal. This isn't psychiatry. I think this person needs prayer. Why is the modern medical world, I'm not saying all doctors endorse these ideas, but why are there still cases out there that they defy explanation and they defy treatment? And then the signs of possession, like, really, like, brain lesion doesn't make you suddenly fluent in ancient languages, knowing details about people's lives. And it's not about, oh, I snooped on the internet and looked at their social media and then I can tell them something bad they did from that photo at a party from college. I mean, very specific things that are not out there. Again, like the most embarrassing thing that nobody knows about and you were alone when it happened and there is no evidence of it, that kind of thing. But I guess, I would say, okay, it's fine if you think it doesn't exist because that's a rational position. If you've never experienced anything spiritual, it's reasonable to say, I don't think it exists because I've not bumped into it. Then I would just say, at least please avoid the dark side of the spiritual world. Please avoid the witchcraft. Please avoid divination, playing around with demonic magic, goetic magic, that kind of stuff. Like, that's not the end of the pool to go looking for your spiritual experience in, is what I would say. So if you're an atheist and you have a natural curiosity about the afterlife, for instance, a parent dies and suddenly you're interested, or you have that moment where you realize you're not going to be around forever, and that question comes into your mind, and you go looking for the spiritual, as most humans do, just please don't go to the dark end of the pool when you do it. Try looking for God. Try looking for the good in the religious communities that try to care for others and show love and support in community versus becoming subservient to these things. So I would say, like, I get it. Just please listen to us enough that when you go looking for the spiritual, you avoid these things.
Everything. Okay, here's a super chat from Jacob Henderson. Looks like he's an atheist YouTuber. He says, atheist YouTuber here. Thanks, Cameron, for all the content. Is there any way to approach the spiritual with the scientific method? I think it helps.
Now, the spiritual in general, maybe, but not this stuff. It would be kind of the equivalent of saying, I don't know, studying sexual assault by trying to control somebody being sexually assaulted and recording it in different ways. Like, it's basically a horrible thing to think about. You're talking about people being like attacked and horrifically damaged and traumatized. That's not the kind of thing that you would then say, okay, now wait, now we're going to change this variable, and now we're going to have you be traumatized again, and we're going to look at whether the independent variables affecting the dependent. So in that sense, no, it's more like, think of it more like this is a spiritual emergency room where you're trying to sew somebody up and keep them from dying. So it doesn't really lend itself to the scientific method. Now, on the miracle side of things, I think there's more room for that. Not that you can get God to do miracles on command, which is what it would take to do an experiment. But there's, I think, more data and more things that don't involve human distress that one could look at. For instance, if you look at the miracles of healings that are used to basically validate sainthood, there's some very striking and interesting cases of healings where outside medical doctors, really good professionals in whatever area that the healing happened in medically, kind of rigorously documented this and worked on it. So I would say the healings are one place you could go, but unfortunately, both God and the demonic doesn't do things on command. So the strict scientific method, I don't think really works.
Not everything must be explained by using the scientific method, as William Lane Craig expertly shows here.
Saying that the fact that science can account for everything, it alone is also adequate, but taken together, the fact that science is omnipotent, and the fact that I can understand why people like you desperately want to believe in God, that is an argument against the existence of God.
But two fallacious arguments put together don't make a sound argument, right?
They are, but do you deny that science cannot account for everything?
Yes, I do deny that science
So what can't it account for?
Well, had you brought that up in the debate, I had a number of examples that I was going to give. I think there are a good number of things that cannot be scientifically proven, but that we're all rational to accept. Let me list 5. Logical and mathematical truths cannot be proven by science. Science presupposes logic and math, so that to try to prove them by science would be arguing in a circle. Metaphysical truths, like there are other minds other than my own, or that the external world is real, or that the past was not created 5 minutes ago with an appearance of age, are rational beliefs that cannot be scientifically proven. Ethical beliefs about statements of value are not accessible by the scientific method. You can't show by science whether the Nazi scientists in the camps did anything evil as opposed to the scientists in Western democracies. Aesthetic judgments, number 4, cannot be accessed by the scientific method because the beautiful, like the good, cannot be scientifically proven. And finally, most remarkably, would be science itself. Science cannot be justified by the scientific method. Science is permeated with unprovable assumptions. For example, in the special theory of relativity, the whole theory hinges on the assumption that the speed of light is constant in a one-way direction between any 2 points A and B. But that strictly cannot be proven. We simply have to assume that in order to hold to the theory.
But you're missing the whole...
So put that in your pipe and smoke it.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
So None of these beliefs can be scientifically proven, and yet they are accepted by all of us, and we're...
All right, we got a question from John Cusack. Why don't we have video recordings of some of these? Do the demons know that they're being recorded?
There's no video recordings because you're not allowed to videotape exorcisms. You're not allowed to audio record them. You're kind of thinking more, and you can see a chinchilla in the background running around. You're kind of thinking more in a casual sense. So if you imagine, like, if a relative of yours was possessed and going through exorcisms, would you want somebody recording that and then putting video clips out? If it were to become...
didn't you say that you want to protect, like, the identity of the folks that
Sure.
are involved in these, and you've changed the names and maybe even some of the genders of people?
Oh yeah, sure. Because your life would be ruined if the media got a hold of the fact that you had gone through exorcisms. Like, there'd be reporters on your front lawn every morning. You'd have to move. That case in, I think it was Illinois, where the kid walked up the wall backwards in front of the staff at the hospital a few years ago, that family had to move because they were harassed so much. The guy who was the basis of the movie The Exorcist, he spent his life in fear of being discovered who he was and was constantly trying to avoid being found out. So, like, these people are asking for help. You don't then record it for your own, I don't know, benefit. And you wouldn't want to, contribute to destroying somebody's life that way.
Well, then why is it okay to tell the stories if you can't record them? I mean, couldn't you just, like, blur out their face or something? Couldn't you do something like that to where you can still protect their anonymity? Is that how you say that?
Well, first off, the rules, there are fixed rules for exorcisms, and one of them is no media recordings allowed, period. So just right there, that's the law of the church. You can't do it. I can tell you that if you tried to do it, yes, the demons would know full well exactly what you're doing, and they would know you're doing something against the rules of the church. And so basically you'd be putting yourself and that person in a very bad position, where you're now introducing a selfish goal into the act of trying to pray for this person. Like, you're going to try to exploit this situation for something else.
For views on YouTube or...
Yeah, like, that would be just really horrible. Now, the point in telling the stories in a limited way that I have is to try to warn people about what not to mess with so they don't get in trouble. And 5 years from now, they're not in trouble, or 10 years from now, they're not in trouble. And that's why I said I think we're all skittish about telling these stories, because you don't want to just tell the horrible story, but you want to share something useful.
So his question is, what are some of the most compelling possession/exorcism cases with a significant amount of information about them? Medical docs, eyewitness testimony, firsthand reports, etc.
Well, again, once we determine somebody's actually possessed and an exorcism is approved, there's no like pursuing data after that. It's kind of like, take a medical analogy. We're going to do a blood test and see if you have this type of cancer. Okay, we found it. You have this type of cancer. You're done investigating. You're now going to go into chemo and radiation or have surgery or all of the above. And the focus is going to be purely on curing the cancer, right? So it's not like this is done in a semi-lab mindset where it's like, well, we need to gather more data about the rest of it. The beginning, you try to rule out medical and psychiatric with an outside evaluation and say, can that explain this? And that's done by an outside medical doctor or psychiatrist, sometimes a psychologist. They're looking at it from their perspective. Then we do the spiritual diagnosis, which is those 4 signs of possession we talked about earlier. If we see that there's actual evidence of possession, you then move on to prayer, but there's no more investigation or recording of things. The closest thing to what he's talking about would be the reports that we get from a doctor, like a literal medical, like, report on the person that's in their file. That's HIPAA. That's somebody's medical documents. Like, nobody's going to show those to you because the federal law protects your medical documentation, right? So if that was shared with us by the patient, by the person, that is in a confidential file in a locked file cabinet. Legally, you don't share that with anybody, nor would you. It's really inappropriate to do that, right? Eyewitness testimony, like all the people in the room see this stuff, but they're not going out talking about it unless there's a very good reason to do so. So you're not going to like find them on YouTube saying I was at an exorcism. The people, the witnesses at exorcisms tend to be older, very prayerful members of the parish and community, often women, that are always there and present to just be witnesses. But they're not there to, like, I don't know, go tell their story or share anything. You know, they agree to confidentiality.
They don't have ulterior motives.
No. These are older, prayerful people that agree to confidentiality, again, to protect the dignity of the people being prayed for. So this idea of like this is open to scrutiny, it really isn't, and the church has never been in a position of like trying to convince the world that this is real or answering to the world about it. Like the church doesn't.
Is another. Sorry to cut you off, but I was going to say maybe that's one difference between like a demon-possessed case and a miracle, is that often in cases of miracles, it's like very open to sharing the documentation, knowing who the person was who was healed.
Except the medical documentation, unless the person has shared it. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. This stuff it's never been something that like, it's, again, the church isn't like answering to the world about this. Like we're trying to help people that are suffering in these horrible ways after an outside medical evaluation. And when we're sure it's possession, then we're just trying to help them. We're not doing this to prove anything to the world.
So that was the first part of what I'm going to do on demon possession on this channel, Lord willing. There's going to be another one with an interview on which I comment where Bertuzzi interviewed a Catholic priest. And then I'm going to also go through an interview that Bertuzzi did with a psychiatrist who worked with priests in demon possession cases. So please stay tuned for those, and thank you for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and have a blessed rest of your day.